your help, and it's appreciated. And so the title is about the modernization of parliamentary IT system in Hungarian National Assembly. So may I ask for the next slide? Thank you. So again, as I mentioned, I just try to summarize the most important steps. I also label these. So digital transition towards e-parliament is a continuous effort in the Office of the Hungarian National Assembly. And I labeled the first steps. Even in the 1980s, we started to develop an electronic voting system that was introduced in the plenary hall. And at that time, it was very modern and it was a real novelty. In the 1990s, at the beginning of the 1990s, we started to develop our IT network, and this is the beginning of our parliamentary system. And even since 1991, we started using computers for documentation and registration. So these were the first steps. The second second period of time that is very important is I call the internet era begins. Since 1995, when we started our parliamentary website for the first time in Hungarian and a little bit later in English as well. And it's also the beginning of our parliamentary information system. We call it PAIR. And I will also tell you a few things about this. And then in 2002, we started streaming the plenary sittings, so it can be watched on the website. Again, it was 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, and at that time, it was a great step towards. And then we also introduced, 2 years later, the e-courier for members of parliament, replacing the paper-based version. Literally, it meant that we didn't have to send tons of paper to the address to the MPs. So we dedicated part of the website for the members, and then it became electronic. Again, a big step, by the way. And then in 2013, we renewed our website and started using content management system, CMS. We are using LifeRay for publishing. As for the administration, it was again a big help, because we can publish our materials more easily. So that was kind of an end of the first internet era, because we are still living in it, by the way. And I would label the professionalization of the IT systems. Since 2015, we started to develop, and we were successful to develop a smartphone application for Android and Apple. And the biggest step was at that time that we introduced in 2016 an e-legislative system called Parlex, which is quite sophisticated and I believe successful system that provides even the electronic submission of parliamentary papers, legislative proposals especially, and other papers, by the way, recently, until the promulgation phase. So it goes through the entire legislative procedure. It is a European award-winning system, so we are very proud of it. And last year we introduced with Gábor this system in Bússola Tech's conference. And finally, because the government realized that we have a very good system in parliament, so they asked the parliament to have a broader system, which called the integrated legislative system. So altogether, we started to develop, and it's still in progress, the entire legislation, including the local governments, the government, and so on, the integrated legislative system. And finally, we also, which is kind of a step for the parliament, by the way, we managed to have an agenda planning program, which is HTML based. It's independent from this integrated legislative system, but this is the final step that we developed. So in a nutshell, that was the development of the Hungarian parliament's IT system. But I would like to pick up a little bit the PAIR system. So please, the next slide, what I need. Thank you. So the barrier is very important because, in my opinion, you cannot develop anything without a good parliamentary database, which is, in our case, is a metadata database, which means that all the different subsystems are connected to each other. It serves the parliamentary website and also the intranet for the inner circle of parliamentarians and the extranet for direct connection with the government. And data can be acquired from 1990, which is kind of a beginning time for us, by parliamentary cycles, parliamentary terms. And what are the subsystems? So we have parliamentary members' data, their offices, motions, speeches, declaration of assets, remuneration, and so on. So it's quite sophisticated, again, a very detailed subsystem. I mentioned that we have, even back in the 1980s, we have data on voting. So there is, again, a detailed voting subsystem, and also parliamentary papers, verbatim minutes, and the video archive of plenary sessions. And by the way, of the verbatim minutes are also searchable in the case of committee meetings. And we also have an entire subsystem for data on committees. So all the parliamentary papers discussed, members, invitation, minutes of the committees, and so on. And finally, we have two other ones, and about officials. So who are the different officials, different leaders in public life, official leaders, of course, parliamentary leaders, state and government officials. Finally, I also would like to mention the subsystem about members of the European Parliament. And for non-European countries, just an additional thing to say that Hungary is part of the European Union, and we have a European Parliament, but Hungarian MPs who are members of the European Parliament are not members of the Hungarian Parliament. On the other hand, they are, in case of a European related topic debated by the Hungarian Parliament, they can come here as invitees, and they can even speak in Parliament. So that is the reason why we have a subsystem for the members of the EU Parliament, Hungarian members for sure. And you can see this picture of the menu system and the parliamentary website. And finally, please, another slide I needed. Thank you. So what are the challenges and future solutions or opportunities for us? There are a lot of, to be honest. I picked up three. First of all, speech-to-text solutions. We are really very actively looking for these solutions because traditionally in our parliament, shorthand writers writing the verbatim minutes, but unfortunately there is no more education, there is no more school for shorthand writers. So there is no newcomers for this stuff, and we have to find some kind of a digital way. To be honest, it's also a very long parliamentary tradition, so but we cannot have any more newcomers for shorthand writers. So that is a big challenge, and it's urgent. Another challenge for us to change and renew our existing systems, it's a permanent work. And finally, I think all of the parliament are interested in artificial intelligence, and we are looking for different solutions. Even we will have a Hungarian conference this September about artificial intelligence. But to be honest, in a personal level, sometimes we use artificial intelligence for different tasks, but institutionally, there are no examples for that, in my opinion. And probably most of the parliaments are lack of these. So my final idea of this presentation that I would like to highlight to emphasize how important the two ways of developing an IT system. So the permanent one, when you are dealing with tiny little errors, things, or you try to develop it step by step, and there are big steps. When there's a big project like the Parlex project, that could be, you know, kind of a leading project, and you can get an award and everything. But these two always coming together, these two way of developing is always together. And by the way, based on the aforementioned database and parliamentary data. So thank you very much for your attention.